Thank you so much. This is a pleasure for us. It's actually an important moment for our organization, for the Multilateral Investment Fund, to really assess what is close to 20 years of work and to chart our course going forward. And it's nice to be able to do it with others, with some of the youth who have benefited from our programs and can give us good suggestions on how to improve, and to others in the audience who have, some of you have been our partners. So about 18 years ago, this organization decided to place a bet on youth, in effect. My predecessor, Don Terry, and the team at that time decided to focus on economic inclusion of youth. And that was at a time when that was not an issue at the top of policymakers' radar screens. If people thought about youth, it was more in social terms. It was not the notion that the failure to include youth in productive economic activity can be a significant drag on economic performance, on the growth of whole economies. So it wasn't a prevalent concept and focus. And so the idea was to test a hypothesis. And the proposition was that it would be possible to correct serious skill deficits, educational failures, through relatively short training programs for youth who had dropped out of school or had graduated without skills. So that was an hypothesis at that time. It was by no means a certainty. And we decided to go down this road, and it turned out the bets we placed were large bets. We devoted a lot of resources to this, people resources, financial resources. Our largest single grants that we've ever made as an institution were made in this field. But a year and a half ago, the organization decided very consciously to step back, take a break from actual projects, and go through a period of self-examination and self-assessment. Which is the kind of thing you do when you have the ambition of being a cutting-edge development institution and you're really trying to focus your resources on the areas where they have the highest impact. So, evidence-based resource allocation is our objective. So we stepped back, worked for a year and a half, as Mariana was saying, and today we are launching the results of that effort, the analysis of what we did, how we did it, what the lessons were that we learned, and what we want to do going forward. So this is what I want to talk about today. But before I actually do that, I want to give credit to our partners, because partners like IYF and YBI really made an enormous amount of difference. If we had not had the strong partners we had, the answer to that question, is it possible to create these training programs, might actually have been no. So, and then the other thing I have to do as I start is to give credit to the team, to my team, Claudio Cotelese and Mariana and Elena and Amaritza Vela and Nora Sullivan, who are an extraordinary team. Even within an extraordinary organization, they are an extraordinary team. So first, let me just say about what the Multilateral Investment Fund is, because it may not be familiar to all of you. Here are the stylized facts of the MIF. It's a laboratory. We were created to be a pioneering organization and to take risk, unusual among developing institutions. Our donors have a high tolerance for risk and for innovation. 2, we're not supposed to just do small experiments. We're supposed to help others take those successful experiments to scale. This is critical to what I'm about to talk about in the youth strategy. We focus squarely on poor and low-income populations. Their businesses, their farms, and their households. We organize ourselves around tools, not around sectors. So our job is to give our clients the tools to raise their income no matter what sector they're in, no matter what country they're in, and what part of the country. We're on the ground all over Latin America and the Caribbean. 45% of our staff are in the region. Also, unusually among development organizations, we can do grants, we can do early stage equity, and we can do loans. And we combine those tools when a combination is the right thing to address a given set of problems. Most of what we do is grants. The next most prevalent financing tool is early stage equity, which is a very powerful tool for us. Our success is measured in part by our leverage. We always have partners. We never act alone. And we must be able to mobilize both the efforts and the financing of others. In 2011, as an example, for every $1 we approved, $4 was added from other partners. So what does this have to do with all of this work? It made us well-positioned to embark on this testing of the hypothesis. First of all, we could try new things and we could fail. Second, we operate all over the region, so it was critically important for us to be able to compare and benefit from the experience in different countries. Third, we're committed to results measurement, so we could in fact compare what, the efficiency and benefits of different programs. Since we're all over the region, we're on the ground, we have the ability to find the right trainers and also companies and others who could partner with us. And we're also well positioned going forward for systemic impact, because we're in the middle of a bank which has a lot of public sector programs in exactly the same areas in youth training. So we have the capacity, which I must say has been perhaps underutilized up until now, to go to the rest of the bank and say, here are some models that work. We can help embed these models in public sector programs. So here are the basic challenges, which I'm sure are familiar and have been discussed in other parts of the conference. 1 out of 5 youth are neither in school, nor in training programs, nor employed. Of the ones that are employed, half are in the informal sector. So we have high rates of unemployment and underemployment for youth. This exists, paradoxically, side by side with employers who are having difficulty finding qualified workers. So an overall survey of the region suggests that 41% of employers struggle to find qualified employees. In some countries, that number is much higher. In Brazil, it's 71%. They value technical skills, but they also value life skills very highly. And those are the skills which are most difficult for them to find in entry-level workers. When I say we've operated all over the region, this gives you a sense. We have done 120 projects in this area of youth, job, and entrepreneurship training. We've reached 235,000 youth. We committed $77 million. We leveraged from others $125 million. As you can see from the map, we operated all over the region. So we operated in large countries, and we operated in small countries, and we operated in middle-income countries and low-income countries. And that was really critical in order to be able to benefit from this experience in diverse circumstances. We always targeted low-income youth, and now increasingly we're targeting at-risk youth. So after all of this experimentation for 18 years, this slide summarizes for you the kind of model that works, which you could call a sort of compound intervention with 6 parts to it. The assessment of market demands, and it's not only what employers want, it's what youth want, picking up on what Mariana was saying, that that's part of our market too. Life skills training. Life skills training has 3 components. It has numeracy and literacy. It has computer literacy as well, critical in the 21st century, but it also has these core skills: communications and teamwork and responsibility and reliability, which are valued so highly by employers. And the technical training geared to the particular jobs in that market. Internships, not a prevalent concept in this region, very important both for employers and employees. It's a very useful way for employers to see how the people who graduate from these training programs function prior to actually hiring them. Job placement services, which are not only conventional job placement, but coaching the youth as part of the training program on how to get a job, and measuring outcomes. So here are the results on the job training side. In essence, we have two broad sets of programs. One is Entre 21, which was by far our biggest. And in that program, over time, we managed to get our job placements rates up to roughly 50%. The other one, which is very promising, which Daniela is part of, is the Aganar program, which uses sports as the value system underpinning the life skills training. And that is turning out to be a very powerful program in terms of job placement. 70% of graduates had a job or returned to school, either as a good outcome. We started in 3 countries. We have expanded to 12 countries. And that's one where we will expand going forward. Switching to entrepreneurship. So the training was also how young people can start businesses. We know in practical terms there are a lot of economies where it's very hard to place youth in a formal job. So this needs to be an option for economic inclusion. Again, a 6-part intervention, diagnostics, and how do you screen the youth in the first place, and I'll come back to that. Business plans, but very important emphasis, business plans are not the end result. They are actually either part of the screening or the training process. Important not to place too much emphasis on business plans. Entrepreneurship training that is both, again, business skills, but also these kind of core personal skills, problem solving. Non-financial services, particularly mentoring. And I'll come back to the importance of mentoring. Then financial services, combining access to finance to the training, and then measuring outcomes. And I would say on financial services, we have a long way to go. I think a lot of us have a long way to go on how to develop financial products for youth entrepreneurs. Quick slide on results. Also, again, over time, these are the results that we managed to generate. Fairly high ratio of businesses created to youth trained in the YBI model, and pretty powerful job leverage once a business is created. 1,200 businesses with 3,200 jobs created in those businesses. Loans of averaging $2,000. So we started in Argentina and Mexico and Colombia, and we've replicated it in 4 Caribbean countries. And then the other one we wanted to highlight was our seed program in Peru, which is doing particularly well in the ratio of businesses created to youth trained. That's a pretty high ratio, 770 to 893. And again, creating a number of additional jobs. We're replicating that in DR, in the Dominican Republic. Okay, so let me just go through. This is the quick version of lessons learned over 18 years of work. So first of all, our first problem was to retain the students. It was not the case that once the students entered the program, they'd automatically stayed and were absolutely wrapped with attention in all of the training. We actually had to spend a fair amount of time figuring out ways to retain students. And one of them has to do with what we just heard, which was we've got to bear some of the costs of getting students to the location of the training. Either we have to have the training in their neighborhoods, or we have to pay transport costs. We've got to make the hours at times when students can be available. If they're anything like my kids, that would not be like 7:30 in the morning or something like that. And then we have the teaching approach matters, and that's why the arts-based training program in Gampao and the sports-based training program in Aganar are so important. We have another possibility that we're working with out there, which is computer-based training, which uses online access to reach students, even computer gaming, so that you engage students. There are particular issues that affect girls and young women that we did not understand fully when we began. Safety issues, domestic violence, and whether their families actually support this activity, child care and pregnancy issues, and general household responsibilities, and then self-esteem issues. And that, as you'll see, affects how we want to work going forward. And then the last thing is what Mariana said. It was fairly obvious. I guess we should have understood this from the beginning, but it's a good thing to ask the youth actually what works for them in order to find out how to improve our program. We need to do a lot more of that, and we need to be more organized in doing that. Importance of life skills. I suspect this is a big theme in the conference, but employers basically say to us, if you can create a pool of labor, of entry-level job seekers that have life skills, it's an enormous benefit to us. We can train them in technical skills if they aren't trained. What we don't have is the life skills. We also found that not only the personality of the trainees, but the personality of the trainer was critical for these kinds of programs when it's very close interaction between the student and the teacher, and you have to have a level of trust and rapport. As I was just saying, sports, arts, computer technology, we found to be most effective. The life skills is not only sort of a lecture on life skills, it is kind of practicing life skills in the program itself. So as you're doing anything in the program, you're practicing the behavioral changes that you want to see. On the program design for job training, in order to engage employers, you basically have to show them that you're solving a problem for them. You're basically saying, we're going to create a group of people who can start right away on your job and who can function in a team, who can function in a large organization, who show up on time, who can communicate with other people, who have kind of a level of self-esteem that allows them, that empowers them. Offering certification of these skills is also very important. These are, to the employer, these are sort of unknown programs. So the employer needs to know that there's a certain set of skills that are actually going to be imparted by these training programs, so certification helps a lot, and we need to work more on that. Internships, not a natural for a lot of companies, particularly in this region. They aren't terribly motivated to do this. So you have to show how this is good for them as well as for the students. Creative job placement solutions for at-risk youth. At-risk youth often are in microeconomies where there are no jobs. So we have to find ways to employ them. One of them is to incentivize their working at a formal company or traveling to a formal company by paying the cost, the initial cost for a certain period of time of that employment. That induces the employer to try out these graduates and then retain them after their productivity is demonstrated. And the other is youth-led cooperatives, actually having the youth themselves who graduate from the program form cooperatives and then employ other graduates. And I'll say more about that. Here's the entrepreneurship program design, lessons learned in a nutshell. Screening youth is important. And so far we've screened by essentially asking them how much any relevant experience they've had. Going forward, we want to screen more in terms of their personalities, personal characteristics. So we want to use some of the sort of psychometric testing that is used in other contexts. Combining core business and software entrepreneurial skills, critical. Business plan, competitions, part of the process. A corporate social responsibility message can be a powerful way to motivate mentors because they don't necessarily come forward on their own. So, and in particular, it's critical to have mentors who've been entrepreneurs themselves. So this is not just a person who works in a business somewhere. This is a person who's actually experienced some of the hurdles of launching a business. And then in the beginning, we combined the implementing agency that did the training with the financing, had the same group do it. It didn't work. So we learned we had to separate because you don't find the same capacity. You can't find it all in one institution. Achieving scale. So basically, to scale these models up, you either have to embed them in public education or training programs, or you have to get large corporates to embed them in their training programs. And not necessarily for corporations only in the training of their employees, but in training a pool of workers that is essentially a public good for the whole economy, workers with these life skills. And we found you can make that case to large corporations. Scaling up requires mechanisms for quality control. If you want to sustain public sector support, you have to have some pretty strong metrics that it works. And you have to be able to demonstrate that costs are lowered. So in one particular example, we had a training program that cost $1,000 a student, and by embedding it in a larger country training program, we reduced the cost to $400 a student, which is pretty inexpensive relative to improving the entire secondary education system. So here's what we want to do going forward. So there are basically 5 components to the strategy. We need to focus on scale. We need to be very ambitious in that regard. Now that we've done 18 years of experiments with these models, we need to help others scale them up. But we need some more innovation to solve some of these problems. I mentioned we need more results, a better framework for results measurement. I mean, we measure jobs created, but there are a lot of other things we should have been measuring at the same time. We need to empower youth to help shape these programs, and we need to focus more on how they impact girls and women. So first on scale, we decided to be pretty ambitious, and we decided to take advantage of the fact that there is probably no other issue area where there is better alignment between governments and companies, particularly large companies, which is the skills deficit. So we went to a number of large companies that are big employers or big presence, have a large presence in the region, and we said, we've got these models, will you help us scale them up? And we were fortunate to be joined by 5 of them initially, although we haven't stopped in our search. One is Arcos Dorados, which is the McDonald's franchisor, Caterpillar, Cemex, Microsoft, and Walmart. So they are going to help us fund bigger programs, employ some of the graduates, provide internships, and provide in-kind services like software for the training or even their own curricula for training. We are fortunate to partner with the International Youth Foundation. I don't know if there's anybody here, but yes, there you are, which, as I was saying before, was critical partner in developing these models, and of course operates not only in this region but all over the world. So here are our goals, our collective goals: to train 1 million youth in 10 years, We actually think that that's a conservative goal. We think we can do better than that. Place at least 50% of them in jobs. At least 50% of those placed have to be women. 10 countries will adopt these models in their own training program to scale. And 1,000 companies, local companies, will be mobilized to participate in this process, either in funding or in employing. So that's the initial set of goals. And this is the way the work is to be divided. We in IYF and other parts of the IDB will be the implementers, designers, and evaluators. The corporate partners are going to help us design the programs. They're going to help us establish the priorities for the countries that we start and then the follow-on countries. And they're going to provide us resources. And governments are to include these programs in their programs. The innovation pillar of this strategy. Here are some of the things we're going to try, and we're always open to additional ideas. First of all, certification. A lot of times certification doesn't exist for the kind of training we do. It's not an academic certification. It's not a sort of like a degree certification. It's a very specific certification for a training program that includes life skills and a certain set of technical skills. So we need to find ways to have outside, objective, impartial, authoritative entities certify what we've done. We can make much more use of online platforms and social media, both to teach and to place in jobs. We found that mentoring and community service is particularly useful for at-risk youth. These are youth in violent neighborhoods with drug traffic, a lot of illegal activity, a lot of family disintegration. And it turns out that person-to-person interaction plus actually having the youth serve in community service is important. As I was mentioning before, we need better screening approaches for young entrepreneurs to identify the ones that really are not only motivated but have kind of the capacity. We're going to do more of trying to insert the youth entrepreneurs into value chains. We do a lot of work in the MIF to link small firms to anchor companies to larger companies. This would seem to be an area where you can explicitly target young entrepreneurs and their firms and link them into these value chains. And the other thing is we have to develop financial products for young entrepreneurs. We don't have a great set of financial products. As you can imagine, banks are reluctant to always lend to small companies, and particularly for youth. It's because youth have no business track record, but they also have very little other track record. So you're facing a situation where, in the absence of public finance, we can't get the private sector to develop products. But we in the MIF have faced this problem a lot in terms of how to get commercial institutions to do things, and so we're pretty hopeful that we can help them start to develop products. Results evaluation and knowledge sharing. This is particularly where I think we at the MIF have to step up to help all of our partners develop indicators, develop monitoring tools, evaluation methodologies, so we're evaluating the impact, not just were you placed in a job, but did your income rise, did that job last, and other measures of your well-being. We're going to have to do capacity building of the executing agencies if we were to achieve scale. And then we're going to create a whole bunch of public goods in the form of guides and toolkits so that we can transfer this knowledge to others. So in other words, every time a government or a corporation goes down this path, they don't have to invent all of this evaluation methodology. And then finally, we want youth to see themselves not just as the subjects Now, not just as the objects of this training, but as the subjects, as the shapers of the training, as well as the recipients of the training. 4 girls. By the way, vencer is the Brazilian version of aganar. I guess we always seem to do yellow. So we have to do more diagnostics on the gender differences in how these projects work. We have to give girls safe spaces, both to train them, but we also have to give them safe ways to get to the training. We have to build support among their families, which is critical for girls to enable them to participate in these programs. So we have found that if you do that kind of thing, you can achieve good results, but we have to do it in a more systematic fashion. And finally, for those of you out there who want to be part of NEO or partner with us in another way, here's what we're looking for. Youth has to be a core focus. You have to have some project implementation experience, of course. We like partners who are adaptable because it's in our nature that we keep adapting to challenges as they arrive. And of course, you have to have a commitment to results and impact measurement. And then since this is inherently a public-private partnership activity, we like partners who have the capacity to bring together a lot of people. So thank you very much for listening to that.